Good evening, afternoon, night, morning, whenever you find a way to watch this podcast. It is me, Omar Shan Borja, the Burger Popper, and I'm back with a special friend of the podcast that we've had multiple times before. We decided to continue the tradition. It was tough this year in a different type of way. I'm back with a former Bates quarterback and great Brendan Costa, who Jackson and I interviewed all the way back, I think, the spring of 2022. And then the past 2 years, we've done a preview of Rivalry Week. But with the holiday weekend coming up and me going out of town and just Brendan's heavy schedule, like, difficult schedule as a offensive coordinator at a high school, we couldn't really make it work before. So we're kind of doing a hybrid. We're recapping the rivalry week games, recapping the NESCAC season a little bit, or at least the championship, and discussing the award winners. But I'm just so glad they were able to continue this for the third straight year. Brendan Costa is back talking NESCAC football with us.
Yeah, man, it's the fourth time that we've been doing this, dude. I'm really fired up. I love being on the pod. And yeah, the scheduling was crazy, but I'm glad that we were able to find some time to get this done because I really think talking about the NESCAC is it's a special league as you know, and just bringing more light to it is really all I want to do. So I'm happy to be back, brother. Fourth time.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad to have you back on the podcast. So, starting off though with the NESCAC, we're not going to start off with the biggest little game in America because I mean there's bigger storylines. But Wesleyan, in honestly just a great, probably like one of the more underrated storylines, and not just D3 but in college football. In the long history of the NESCAC, they won the conference for just the second time and the first time outright, and it's just amazing. Like in the same year where you have Columbia winning the Ivy League for the second time ever, you have just this, I guess, great instance of parity where Wesleyan has a dream season. They end up winning the conference with an 8-1 record, and they ended the season with just a great victory against Trinity. And Nico Candido had 3 touchdown passes in that one. He had a gritty 20 carries for 51
Mhm.
yards. It was absolutely gritty performance in a 27-17 victory. But Brett, I guess your thoughts from playing in the league. I guess how much of a surprise was it to see Wesleyan emerge as champions this year, and what does it mean for their program?
Yeah, I think Wesleyan's been knocking on the door ever since I've been there. They've always been a tough, tough defensive team. They've always had athletes on their squad. They always seem to have a quarterback that completes the ball. I think that's the most important stat, especially for a quarterback, is, passing completion above 60% at the minimum. They've always had receivers on the outside. Their receiver, he won NESCAC Offensive Player of the Year, Chase Wilson. He had a great year for Wesleyan. And then their coach, Coach Dan DeCenzo, he's been there for a while now. He's a fantastic coach. He's a culture builder, really, really intellectual with the X's and O's. But they've been hanging in tough like every year, like second place, third place, fourth place. They're always at the top of the league. I'm really, really happy that Coach DeCenzo was able to finally break through and get that NESCAC championship that he's wanted for a long, long time. Wesleyan 8-1, but their one loss. I don't know if you know this yet. To Bates College, the only loss they had was to Bates. So in my mind, I think Bates secured their first NESCAC championship of all time. But I'll give props to Wesleyan first and foremost.
Well, you could say that with the transitive property, but who knows if Bates could be next because it looks like the parity in the NESCAC is increasing, as you said, it with Wesleyan finally breaking through in that one. I think now, I guess we could talk about the biggest little game in America, and I'm not going to say the rivalry is losing its luster, but again, you have two teams that are kind of in the middle of the pack playing in it, and probably the most well-known rivalry in the NESCAC with Amherst and Williams. And this one was a bit of a defensive slugfest. And I
Mhm.
gave Player of the Week honors to Holden Gehring on the podcast the week after. Just an amazing game. I mean, 10 tackles, 2 interceptions, and a dominant defensive performance by Williams, 21 to nothing. But I want to ask you this, Brennan, as a NESCAC player, I guess, did you guys ever get jealous of the attention that Amherst and Williams got with the rivalry? Because talking to an old grad at the Columbia game yesterday, which I double dipped before Notre Dame Navy or Notre Dame Army had to get 2 games in one day. But talking to an 80-ish-year-old Columbia grad, he said that Harvard and Yale have the easiest recruiting jobs in the Ivy League just because they're the biggest brand names in the Ivy League. So, do you
Mhm.
think the same kind of thing happens with Amherst and Williams? And did you ever get jealous of the two programs?
Yeah, honestly, like we had our own thing in Maine, like Bates, Colby, Bowdoin. Obviously, like we're three of the weaker. I don't want to call programs because the programs are full of history, but like three of the weaker teams in the league. So we were always pretty focused on those rivalries, but the Williams and Amherst rivalry obviously dates back way, way, way back. I had the pleasure of coaching in that rivalry as well. I saw it firsthand. It was incredible to see. The games on NESCAC. It was on College Game Day way back in the 2000s. Um, so I think honestly, like they do get a lot of great recruits, but even teams like Trinity and Wesleyan and Tufts, like they get some really, really good recruits, and even Middlebury up in Vermont get some stud recruits up there. But I wouldn't say I've ever been jealous of their rivalry. Definitely honoring their rivalry was probably the biggest thing. Nothing but respect for those two head coaches, especially, I can't say enough about Coach Raymond at Williams College. One of the best football minds and just one of the best overall football guys I've ever been around. Like really, really cared about his players and his staff and his program. Like does things the right way. And that might be me being biased, but I saw it firsthand. There's not a voice in the room of the Williams football program that does not respect Coach Raymond. He's an incredible person. And even Coach, his name slipped in my mind. It's probably not good, but the head coach at Amherst, he's also a fantastic guy. Way back before I took the job at Williams, I was offered a job at Amherst to coach there as well. So I was choosing between Williams and Amherst to coach at. I ended up going with Williams, which that was a tough phone call to make. But just two historic teams in the history of how they became schools. Their football history is second to none. Obviously, in the NESCAC, it's probably the best. I will say it is probably the best rivalry in the NESCAC. Even though that hurts to say, but it probably is.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, just looking at the box score, looking at the stats and the highlights of the game, it's just an old fashioned, just northeast late, like no late. I guess not even late because it's 9th of November, but November Northeast football game with Williams just grinding it out. Both teams having trouble passing the ball. So I mean, good to see Williams come out on top on that one. As my cousin Crystal is a Williams alum, so I mean, I guess that's my little investment in the rivalry. But yeah, like I said, two middle of the pack teams in that one, but still gets most of the attention. So, and any more to say about that one, Brendan?
I mean, that's that game. Williams was they were now that I'm looking at the stats, I didn't really realize it when I looked at the box score. They didn't have their starting quarterback or their starting running back play for them in the game, and they still were able to pull it out. I think it's what was it, 21-0. They didn't have Owen McHugh. Williams, pretty sure he's a sophomore this year. Their starting quarterback, a young buck, really, really good player. And then they didn't have Mario Fischetti, who was an all NESCAC running back. They didn't have him. But from me personally, I used to coach the Williams running backs. They have a stable of guys that can do it all, especially John Orris, who kind of picked up the slack and had 20 attempts for 75 yards. John is a little grinder. He is tough as nails when he's running the football. I just want to give a quick shout out to my man Will Shesky on the Williams on the Williams squad. Will is one of the greatest kids I've ever had the privilege to coach. Super hard work, and he had 7 carries for 19 yards. But he runs like a vintage Mike Allstott. He's an absolute beast. So I was really, really happy to be able to coach him as well. I could not give him a shout out.
Hey, I love it. As an Army fan, we love fullback types.
Oh yeah.
They're a dying breed. So it's great to hear. And I mean, just from an arena and like indoor, I guess perspective, like there's still a place that more so arena. There's still a place for fullbacks in the modern arena game with the Arena Football League coming back and now rebranding to Arena Football One. So maybe you'll see Chesky in a 50-yard field near you if you're an Arena Football fan. So
Which would be awesome.
um, not a knock at all. Just love the arena game. So, going on to, I know this is probably the hardest part of the podcast for you, Brendan, but Bates lost a close one to Hamilton, 24-21. They fought back hard. It was a bit exciting in the end, but they fell short ultimately to the only program in New York in the NESCAC, and Luke Curzum just performed outstandingly at quarterback, 35 total yards, 57 rushing yards, and 3 touchdowns for Hamilton. And any thoughts on that game? In particular, I know you probably have a lot though. You give your Bates a love.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot to say about Bates this year. I thought honestly, really, really, really fantastic job by the coaching staff. I was in constant, I wouldn't say constant, but I contacted Coach Coin a couple of times during the year, just checking in and see how the boys were doing. Colton Bosley, their quarterback, was my protege when I was there, when I was a fifth year senior, and he was a freshman. Um, he was still there. My left tackle, not Phil, Pete Simplicio. I played with all the Simplicio brothers who played at Bates. His little brother Pete was my left tackle. He was all NESCAC this year on their offensive line. Only team to have a running back rush for 1,000 yards, because they kind of changed to that spread triple option style type offense, which comes from the offensive coordinator Mitch Thompson. It's kind of like because he comes from Amherst, and back in the probably say about 10 years ago, that's what Amherst was predominantly running, was kind of that spread triple and being able to throw off of it. The only thing that didn't really culminate for them was, just wins. I mean, they had two huge wins. They were 2-7, but they beat Middlebury and they beat Wesleyan, which is that hasn't happened, I don't think, since the 1980s. Like they haven't beaten them in 30 to 40 plus years. Very, very proud to watch those games for them. But, got to get that last one at Hamilton. It's a tough game, especially because Hamilton beat them last year. But before that, Bates had handled Hamilton for about 3 to 4 years. So I know that they're still kicking themselves about that. But I think Bates is definitely a team to watch for next year as these young guys, because they're running back Ryan Linsky, 1,000 yards, first team all NESCAC. He's only a sophomore. And they have another quarterback coming up, Seneca Moore. He's only a sophomore and he can run in that, that spread triple offense. They had a freshman this year, Sean Green. I played with his brother Liam Green when I was there, and Sean's a big body quarterback who can run, who can throw the ball, perfect for that offense. Um, I think Bates has a lot of guys returning. They're going to lose this class that they had now. They're going to lose a lot of great bodies, but I think the future is definitely positive for the Bobcats. So I'm excited. I'm excited. Hopefully we can turn into a little Wesleyan storyline and we can make a run at it the next 2 years. That'd be awesome.
Absolutely. And I mean, college football is better when, there's more parity, when there's storylines like that, when droughts are broken, and everything. And I'm optimistic though, like you say, with the spread option. I mean, it takes a couple years when you're making a drastic change of schemes, because you mentioned them running the air raid when you were there. So it looks like they're close. They have the pieces to. It just takes some time, honestly. But I mean, the spread option is an underrated system. Like they've brought, I guess, not exactly the bait scheme. I'm not sure the exact specifics of like the bait gun option, like the differences between it and Davidson. But when I think about gun option, I think about Davidson in the Pioneer Football League, who I
Mhm.
think they had I think it was three straight playoff appearances in the Pioneer Football League in that program. Like there was this general apathy towards the football program. And so the spread option is a great system. And I'm excited too. Like now that you mentioned option, being an Army fan, like I think Bates is
Yep.
going to be, I mean, of course, talking with you, it should have been enough reason for Bates to be my favorite NESCAC program, but even more so, they're my favorite now.
So like when I first got there, we were spread option, we were spread triple. So I was a little bit optimistic because we had kind of advocated for that to, be a little bit more futurized and move to that air raid system, especially when we got that new coaching staff when I was a sophomore. But after watching it this year, I think they have the pieces. They're a couple of guys away, from being really, really special. And especially like with that offense, you gotta have reps at it. You have to have years under your belt underneath it. You have to have, guys who can teach the younger guys who get recruited in, like what they see during these plays and kind of how they run it. I think that's the most important thing is, having guys on the team who can be mentors for young guys. And then once they go up, they kind of mentor the next batch of Bobcats. But I'm really really excited where the program's going. I think Coach Coyne and his staff did a phenomenal job this year. Even though 2-7, those two wins are huge, but most of the team returns next year, and they got some studs. So I'm excited to see. I think they'll be fine next year.
Yeah, I'll be on the lookout for them next year for sure. Um, hopefully get to see a couple games, like or make some time. Hopefully I'll remember to make some time for a couple games on a on the multi-screen setup. But
Mhm.
staying in Maine, Colby and Bowdoin, right? Like for that one, we had Colby win 34-10 on the strength of Miles Drake's 198 passing yards and two touchdowns. And you're familiar with these schools. You're familiar with all these schools, obviously, but these schools are a bit different in terms of I guess Um, your feelings towards them, with them being part of the whole main trio, the Colby Bates Bowden consortium. So I guess thoughts on Colby Bowden, thoughts on like both those teams' seasons, especially with Colby's win in the final week.
Kobe and Bowden. Those are it's like I don't know how to explain it. It's like when you're Alabama and you say Georgia. You know what I mean? It's all though it's nobody really knows about the Colby Bates Bowden rivalry, but that rivalry goes back to the 1800s, and those rivalries are bloodbaths every year. Bowden, this was one of their first times in recent memory. I don't know if they won it last year, but one of their first times in being able to compete for the CBB in a long time. The CBB meaning like whoever wins out of those three schools. But Colby's won it again. Colby's been on a tear since probably 2018. They've won the majority. I think if there were six, I think they've won at least five of them. Coach, again, I'm blanking on these names. I haven't seen them in a long time, but the coach at Colby used to be the coach at UMaine. Coach Cosgrove. Coach Cosgrove, fantastic coach. His staff's fantastic. They had um, a lot of returning players this year. The running back Keon Smart, linebacker Julian Young, both studs, both all NESCAC again this year. Um, when it comes to Colby and Bowden, I've never been able to observe a game from them, but just knowing that like how our games are with Colby and Bowden, I'm sure it's not that much different. It's the stakes are high, especially in the last week of the season when you're fighting for something, regardless of what their records are. Once once those three teams are kind of taken out of the NESCAC contention for the full conference championship, it goes right to the CBB. And Colby winning it again is huge. But Bowden again, I really thought this was going to be the year for them. They had a bunch of guys returning. They did lose their quarterback to graduation this year, but the guy behind them, um, I think you just brought up his name. Yeah, Robbie Long for Bowden. He was a stud he played underneath the past quarterback Andrew Bull, but the kid's an absolute beast. I'm pretty sure he's a lefty. But in this game, tough game, 13 for 24, 166 and three picks. Definitely not going to win the game, throwing picks like that. But yes, Miles Drake for Colby, 21 or 34, 198, two touchdowns. I really think that seals the deal, especially in those games. It really comes down to the quarterback play, who can not turn the ball over, and which defense can force the most turnovers. Usually wins those games.
Yeah, seeing just from action around the league, just this league when it gets, I guess, to late in the season, kind of low scoring, these just grinded out, kind of tough games, and like you said, the turnovers, it helps or hurts your team a lot because scoring opportunities seem to be at a premium in those types of games, and I guess that was pretty evident in Tufts Middlebury, 17-7 game. Javier Rios kind of stood out to me the most for Tufts with 8 tackles and 2 sacks. But about that game, I was also surprised too by the attendance figure. Looking at that, over 5,200 or over 5,255 fans attended that game against Middlebury, and I had no idea that the Ellis Oval was that big, but that's a great figure for Division 3, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Huge. Honestly, that's one of the best places to play in the NESCAC because if you are sitting in the stands, I'm pretty sure you can see the skyline of Boston right in the background if you're in the home grandstand. I didn't know it fit 5,000 people either. It might have just been because the NESCAC doesn't sell tickets, so I don't know where they're getting these numbers, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was 5,000 people there, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that they didn't sell tickets, honestly. But yeah, that's just
Mhm.
off the box score. The figure there, but Tufts had a great year, 7-2, I guess. Any thoughts on them? Are they next up? I know Middlebury, I think, has been the traditional power in the
Mhm.
NESCAC, but any thoughts on Tufts? Are they up next? Are they gonna have a Wesleyan type story next year, you feel?
I don't know. They're going to lose their quarterback, Michael Berluti. He's been a staple for them for the past 4 years. He started for 4 years. They're going to lose him to graduation. I don't really know what they have coming up. But they always get their recruits in, and they always have guys waiting in the wing. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're in that mix next year. Because usually it's Trinity and Middlebury. They're always in the mix. I think Williams is going to be a tough team to beat next year. Um, But yeah, I think Tufts can they're always in that middle of the pack mix. They're always with like a Wesleyan, like knocking on the door. Um, so I wouldn't be surprised. And Coach Savetti does a fantastic job. Again, there's so many fantastic coaches in the NESCAC that nobody really talks about. Coach Savetti's been leading that team for well over 14 years now. But I think the graduation of the quarterback, Michael Berluti, is going to be tough to overcome. He was first team all NESCAC twice, second team once. He was first team this year, which I think I disagree with him being first team this year. And a little bit of a down year, but that just goes to show how much respect the coaches have for him in the league. And he's definitely a key part of why they went 7-2. So I won't complain too much, but there was somebody else that might have been a little bit more deserving. But Michael Berluti definitely an X factor for that Tufts team. But so losing him is going to be it's going to be a tough go for him at first, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's always. I remember us talking about Berluti last year as well too. That name was really very familiar in doing this research this
Mm-hmm.
week, and seemed like he'd been around forever because I feel like we talked about him the year before that too. I don't remember the exact. I didn't listen back on the 2022 podcast, but yeah, always tough when he's a 4 year starter. I mean, especially in a league like the NESCAC too, with such where you have such familiarity or with all the
Mm-hmm.
opponents. The
Yeah,
tendencies.
he's been starting since I was in my last year, and we had a great battle in our game. So I have a lot of respect for him. But yeah, he's been there for a while. He's been gunslinging for a while in Boston.
Yeah, so speaking of conference honors, as you mentioned, Michael Berluti was all conference. Now we're just going to talk about the conference awards and I guess any observations as well about the first team all offense and defense. Just a quick run through of the players. So Chase Wilson won Offensive Player of the Year with 834 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns in 9 games on just 43 catches. Just a great deep threat. Defensive
Mm-hmm.
Player of the Year, I should say Chase Wilson was from Wesleyan, and his teammate Ben Carbo of Wesleyan had 14 and a half tackles for loss, 58 tackles, or sorry, 66 total tackles, 14 and a half tackles for loss, which included 7 sacks for Wesleyan as Defensive Player of the Year. And then Rookie of the Year was, just saw the stat, yeah, Jack Nye. Jack Nye, maybe a science guy or not, but 34 catches. I had to do it. I
That
had to
was
do it.
perfect. That was perfect.
Maybe a science guy or not, but 34 catches for 526 yards, but only 1 touchdown, surprisingly. I mean, Colby's got to get Nye the ball in the end zone. I mean,
Yep.
great year for sure, but only 1 touchdown. Kind of, got to throw him a bone. But yeah, I guess any thoughts on the players of the year, I should say. And I know you gave your thoughts on Berluti winning
Yeah.
first team honors on offense, and then
Mhm.
any thoughts on the team on the first team itself.
I think Berluti obviously is a fantastic choice, but when you look at his stats, only 9 touchdown passes this year. He did go over 2,000 yards. But if you're somebody who really watched the NESCAC this year, I think Xander Zabrowski from Trinity was the clear choice for first team quarterback. I mean, when you look at his stats, they're pretty mind boggling, especially because they only lost one game. I mean, he threw for 2,400 yards and 24 touchdowns to 2 picks on 72% completion rating. I mean, that's that's fantastic. It's one of the best seasons I've seen in a long time in the NESCAC. Compared to Beluda, who did have a good year, but not what he's used to putting up. He went over 2,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, 5 picks to a 60% completion rating. Um, it's just when you look at those teams, a lot of the awards sometimes come down to, who won. So usually whoever wins will get defensive and offensive, unless there's somebody else on another team who's just head and shoulders above everybody else. And that's not to knock who won it this year. They were fantastic players, both of them, Chase Wilson and Ben Carbo. But really, just for the all NESCAC teams, I think for Xander Zabowski being second place in the NESCAC, behind Wesleyan with those stats, I think should have probably given him the nod as the first team quarterback. Um, but there's some other guys on here, Tyler DiNapoli, Trinity kid, who's been, he's been there for a while now. He's been a stud. Ryan Linsky, first Bates running back to get all NESCAC in a long, long time. Happy for the kid. You had Sean Clapp from Trinity, who's an absolute stud receiver. Nolan O'Brien, who's a stud receiver. Tim Forth on the offensive line, stud. He's from Williams. But I think it's pretty spot on. Besides, I think if you flip the quarterbacks, and that's my only thing. And I love Berludi's game. I love because he's a mobile kid. He can throw the rock. I'm just saying, based off of the stats and the records, I think, my opinion, Zabrowski probably should have been first team. I mean, his stats were head and shoulders above everybody else's. I feel like it would have been tough not to give it to him. But that's just my 2 cents. And I'm not part of the NESCAC, front office, whatever, whoever decides. That's just my 2 cents on the situation.
That's fair. I mean, not much controversy is good as well. But it's interesting. I mean, we know the Heisman Trophy has become mostly best quarterback on best team. But it's interesting to see that
Yeah.
philosophy carry
Hmm.
on to, I guess, the NESCAC's selection
Hmm.
of their first team their awards.
Hmm.
But I think that's everything we have so far, or everything we planned for in this recap. Hopefully next year at this time we'll have a preview for you instead of a recap. Either way, it was still
Yep.
a fun time, Brendan. Always a
Yeah.
pleasure to have you on. I really enjoy this, and I remember like talking to my wife, like, man, like I really forgot like this year because I was like, oh man, like I just was like sitting to like, oh man, I forgot to record the NESCAC preview, and then you
There's a
know,
lot of stuff going on, man. There's a lot of football
yeah.
games, a lot of stuff going on. So it's all right. Next year we'll plan well ahead and we'll get it
Oh,
going.
absolutely. And I just want to say good luck to your team on Thanksgiving because growing up in
Thank
Massachusetts,
you.
those Thanksgiving games, I mean, those were, those were really a
Yeah.
pleasure. And it was kind of crazy. It's kind of something that I guess I kind of wish I had in New Mexico because come Thanksgiving time, it was always playoff time. Like there weren't set rivalries, but like it was like if you made it to the semifinals, you're playing on Black Friday and like not even Thanksgiving really. So
Mhm.
definitely something that I kind of wish I had. I have no regrets playing high school football, but
Mhm.
man, those Massachusetts Thanksgiving rivalries are like amazing. They're different.
Crazy. Our game has been going on, I think, for close to 100 years. So the traditions there, the whole town, both towns come out. We have a home game this year for it, so I'm excited. Excited to try to get the W. Right now we're 5-5, so we're trying to push to 6-5. That'd be a huge turnaround for us from last year. So I'm excited, man. Nothing like Thanksgiving football in Massachusetts. There's nothing like it.
Yeah, nothing like it. Yeah, making me miss home because I remember the playoffs too and everything. The whole day long marathon of the playoff games or the championship games at Gillette Stadium. So great high
Mhm.
school football culture in Massachusetts. And I know it's not Texas or anything, but the traditions there and everything,
Mhm.
and the people rally behind it.
Yep, it's got its own feel to it. It's super unique. Nothing like Texas, obviously. Texas is its own, might as well be college football over there, but Massachusetts high school football feels like high school football. So I'm excited, man.
Yeah, and I'm excited for you as well. But until next time, everyone, thanks for joining. Thank you again, Brendan. But until next time, peace, love, and soul in the Burger Poppers.